everyone. We're coming on the air with breaking news from Atlanta, where something both historic and now somewhat routine is playing out. Former President Donald Trump has departed the Atlanta airport. He's on his way to surrender to authorities at a Fulton County Jail. Mr. Trump has been indicted already on 13 counts for his alleged efforts to overturn the 2020 election results. The former president will surrender to authorities at the jail. They will process him, fingerprint him, and possibly take his mugshot. That's a live aerial view right now of the motorcade as it makes its way toward the jail. The process the former president will undergo is what many of his co-defendants have already gone through. You can see their mugshots here. Mr. Trump and the 18 other defendants are accused of engaging in what the DA called a criminal enterprise to overturn Georgia's election results. All have been charged with violating the state's racketeering or RICO law, often used to prosecute organized crime. This is the fourth time the former president has surrendered to authorities this year, but this time will be different than the other three. While he will be processed and released on a $200,000 bond tonight, he will still need to be in court in 2 weeks to be formally arraigned, though it's not clear if he'll return in person or show up remotely. As we look at this picture of the motorcade, let me bring in Blaine Alexander outside the jail. Blaine, the officials there have said nothing will be different with President Trump versus the other defendants, but clearly that can't entirely be the case.
Absolutely not, Lester. We know that this is going to be an extremely expedited process. We've already seen signs of this moving much more quickly than it does for any normal person who's coming to this jail. Typically, a person could wait some 12 hours to be booked in, processed, and booked out. But we've already confirmed, NBC News has confirmed, that he has hired a bail bond agency to handle his bail from the Fulton County Jail. We've confirmed with that agent that there is a person inside and spoken to them. And we understand that that bond has already been paid. So when you talk about the fact that there's already a bond agreement in place, again, $200,000 bond, and the fact that it's been paid, we know that he's going to spend very little time in here. We expect that it will be, in fact, less than an hour, if not even shorter time than that. Now, Lester, as I was watching that motorcade, I was recognizing some of the scenery there in Atlanta. I know that he is very near. In fact, if you'll look right here, we see a flurry of activity. We see law enforcement streaming by in a very clear show of force. This is Jefferson Street. This is the street that the former president will enter. This is not the main entrance of the jail, mind you. This isn't the place where most inmates walk in. This is kind of the back area as you watch this motorcade beginning to come right here. We'll watch this and let it play out. But again, we're seeing these flashing lights behind us. Very clear that the motorcade is beginning as we expect to watch some vehicles carrying the former president coming in here into the jail. Now, as for how long he's going to stay inside, Lester, go ahead.
Yeah, Blaine, earlier there were supporters of the former president as well as some protesters protesting against him. Is the crowd nearby?
Well, they've been on both sides. The larger crowd is on the other side, not the side where he's coming in. But there, Lester, we saw some good 50, 60 people standing outside in oppressive heat, mind you. We're talking about record high temperatures here in Atlanta. Some people drove from some 9 hours wearing Trump T-shirts, carrying signs, Trump 2024 signs, making it clear, telling me that they wanted to be out here to show their support for the former president. Now, I should point out this street has been locked down, so nobody other than media and a high number of security can actually be here. Law enforcement can be here on this street. So many of the protesters that we saw driving through earlier have had to move elsewhere. But we understand from our teams on the other side of the courthouse, rather on the other side of the jail, that before this was locked down, you certainly saw a large number of supporters, a large number of people who wanted to make their presence known, Lester.
Yeah, obviously we're going to keep this shot up. We're not sure if we'll see the former president when he exits and goes into the jail. While we watch this, let me bring in NBC News senior legal correspondent Laura Jarrett. Laura, flurry of activity today regarding the timing of a trial. Suddenly, the timetable moved rapidly forward.
It did, and that's in part because at least one of Mr. Trump's co-defendants, one of the people that the DA believes is sort of behind the fake elector scheme, that scheme to put forth those pro-Trump slates of electors, his name is Ken Cheeseborough, he put up a demand and said, I want to take this case to trial. I have a right to a speedy trial. And the district attorney had to respond in kind. Under Georgia law, she has to honor that, and the judge set the date for October 23rd. But that doesn't mean that date will necessarily stick. We all know that these things are unpredictable, and it may be the case that it gets pushed out. And it may also be the case that he goes it alone. He doesn't have to be tried with any other defendant, Lester.
All right, we're watching the motorcade. It's made its way to a carport there, so we're not sure we'll see him or if he will exit the vehicle under that carport out of sight. Kristen Welker also with us, our senior Washington correspondent, Hallie Jackson. Kristen, let me start with you. There is a sense that this was choreographed in terms of the president really kind of calling the shots here, the former president, in terms of when this would occur.
Well, and it's notable that what happened last night was the first GOP primary debate, and now here he is turning himself in, not 24 hours afterwards, to some extent really capturing the spotlight, if you will, Lester. Look, I've been talking to folks who are inside his orbit, and they are striking a very defiant tone. He did this online interview last night that got 200 million views. They've been touting that to kind of talk about the fact that these indictments, they believe, are only making him politically more popular. But if you dig a little deeper and talk to some of those in his inner orbit, there is also some concern that this is taking place and unfolding in a critical state, Georgia. It's a state that he almost certainly would need to win in order to be reelected in 2024. And so there's concern about that and concern about some of the images that we may see if he, in fact, has a mugshot taken of him. What would the impact of that be politically, Lester? But we know that this is a former reality TV star. He's no stranger to making use of images, and I wouldn't be surprised if he used a mugshot to try to energize his supporters.
I wanted to bring in Hallie in that. You know, when we first heard about the mugshot, most people would think of that as a negative. But the way he has been embracing his fate here, for his own election chances, kind of changes everything.
I wouldn't be surprised if we saw it, if it happened, sold on T-shirts in his merch store, Lester, because that has been part and parcel of the tone from Team Trump all along. They see this as political persecution, and that's how they've been casting it and framing it to supporters of the former president. To the point that Kristen's been making on the optics, it is extraordinary here. Whether we get a mugshot or not, we have been looking live now at the former leader of the free world at an active jail. This is not a federal courthouse. This is not ceremonial. I mean, this is the real deal. This is where a lot of defendants go to end up booked, just like Donald Trump, who not only is the former president, but is the current Republican frontrunner. There is a political risk here. We've talked about it a bit. In the primary, most Republicans are standing by the former president. We have seen that in recent polling. Half of Republicans, for example, in a recent Fox poll, do not believe that he did anything seriously wrong when it came to election interference, which is the crux of the case that he's facing here in Georgia, as well as that federal indictment. But look more broadly, half of all respondents do, right? There is a difference to how this plays, essentially, politically in the primary election versus the general election. And that's where I think some of this concern is coming from. If Donald Trump is the nominee, what happens in a state that is such an important battleground? Let
me bring up Blaine Alexander as we look at the vehicle stacked up outside that carport. Blaine, I know you've talked to people about this facility. It has frankly, a bad reputation, but also it must, walking into a place like that must strike you about the weight of what you're facing and the darker corners of the criminal justice system.
This situation in Georgia is so different from the other legal challenges that the former president is facing, among other reasons, of course. But yes, the fact that he is, as Hallie said, surrendering to a jail. Let me tell you about this jail, by the way. This is a jail that currently is under investigation by the Department of Justice to see if it violates, has any civil rights violations, and investigating the conditions inside. So what we have is this really stunning image of the former commander-in-chief walking in to surrender at a jail that is currently under investigation by the government that he used to lead and the government that he's currently running to lead again. So if we just soak that in for a moment, that's just stunning in and of itself. But when you talk about the details of it, that jail is meant to hold about 1,500 or 1,600 people. It has been plagued by overcrowding in recent years. Bed bugs, in fact. In fact, one person recently died after being covered in bed bugs. The sheriff has been trying to get more money to build a new facility, told it'll cost some $2 billion to get what he needs in order to house the amount of inmates that they have. So just a number of issues around this jail. But now, of course, we need to put it in perspective. It's very unlikely the former president will, of course, be in any of those cells. He's not going to be inside for any long amount of time. But when you talk just about the facility that he is stepping foot inside, that certainly lets you know just the gravity of this situation, Lester.
All right, Blaine, thank you. We'll ask you to stand by. Let me go to Gabe Gutierrez. He's also outside the Fulton County Jail in Atlanta. You've been near some of the demonstrators there. Were they able to see the motorcade as it entered the complex?
No, Lester, and actually we're around the corner from where Blaine has been reporting from. This is actually the main entrance of the Fulton County Jail, and as you can see, there are now several dozens, if not more than 100 demonstrators that have, some of them have been here really throughout the day, and we've seen an increased security presence that has been ramping up throughout the day, Lester, just as a precaution. This has been a very calm crowd, not much tension here, but there is a lot of frustration by Mr. Trump's supporters that have come here. There have been a few counter demonstrators as well, very few of them. But I want to talk to one person really quickly. I just met you, Penny. She's from Atlanta, and you decided to come here today. Why are you here?
I'm here to support Donald Trump and every American's right to freedom of speech.
And do you think, you were telling me earlier, you believe that President Biden did win the 2020 election, but you're not a fan of these prosecutions, you don't buy the charges?
Exactly.
Well, thank you very much for speaking with us, Penny. And Lester, we have spoken with others here who are frustrated, and they do believe that this is a political persecution. This is something we're hearing over and over again. One of Donald Trump's surrogates, Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene, also here reiterating that message. And I'm just now being told that former President Trump is inside the Fulton County Jail, as you heard Blaine say, a notorious jail for a number of reasons under federal investigation. The former president of the United States now being processed. And the question will be, will we see that mugshot? Just earlier today, we did see the mugshot from his former chief of staff, Mark Meadows, who's out on $100,000 bail. But again, just a credible thing to witness here, Lester. All the dozens at least of former President Trump supporters, if not more than 100 here, are out here trying to get the message across that they believe that this prosecution is unwarranted.
All
Lester?
right, Gabe, thank you. Let me bring Laura back. We received word that he's officially been booked.
Yeah.
Walk us through the steps here, because we've seen two of these in federal court. We saw one in state court in New York, in which they're essentially arraigned. The first appearance is an arraignment. At what point does that happen, where he's able to plead not guilty or guilty?
And every state does this a little bit differently. But the reason that we're seeing this in sort of a two-step situation is Georgia actually has you come in, you surrender, and then the arraignment, where you hear the formal charges, that happens at a later date. And that may happen the week of September 5th. That's what the district attorney wants. We'll see exactly what date it is. But we now have the booking information here, which lays out all the charges. It lays out the bond amount. That's something that's different in this case. In other cases, he's been released on his own personal recognizance, which basically means you sign a statement saying, I'm going to show up. In this case, he had to use a bail bondsman. Again, it just sort of underscores this is a different type of case. This is I think, perhaps a more humbling experience walking in the facility, as Blaine and Gabe laid out. I mean, this is a place that's, has bed bugs, right? This is not a cozy environment. And again, being able to have to put up money, essentially, not, actually paying money to the court, but using this bail bondsman to sort of expedite the process so that hopefully that he doesn't have to stay any longer than he would want to there. You can imagine why someone would want to do that. But even, again, just sort of the simple things like having to provide your weight, right? Like, these are things that you can imagine the former commander-in-chief is not in the position to want to do.
Let me throw out a political question, and that is, we've talked about how the former president has drawn strength from these prosecutions, but there will come a time after this arraignment that this will get quieter, at least in some pockets. So is it really you've talked to the Trump folks. Are they concerned that over time this will kind of fade out of the daily headlines and that he's left with the scar of it all?
I think they are concerned about the fact that it will start to chip away at his support, if not in the primary and the general election. And Lester, to your point about what we expect to happen over time, these court cases and court proceedings are going to intersect with key dates on the campaign trail. And that, from a logistical standpoint, poses particular challenges. So I think that is one of the concerns that they have in terms of keeping it in the spotlight. I think he is going to do that. I think you are going to continue to hear him make the case that this is a political persecution, as Hallie said earlier, that he is fighting on behalf of the American people. This is a line that we hear over and over again from him. So I think he will find a way to keep this in the spotlight, even in the private moments. But again, it's the general election, if he, in fact, does win the nomination, that's particularly problematic when you think about independent voters, when you think about women voters, when you think about that voter who voted for him in 2016 and voted for Joe Biden in 2020. These images don't necessarily help win back that voter, which is what he would need to win the White House again.
It is the collision of the political and the legal timelines, Lester. So even if the sort of high-profile live picture piece of this were to fade away in a few months as some of these legal filings go back and forth and we wait for at least one of these trials to begin potentially before the 2024 election, even if his Republican opponents in the primary do not make this a character issue, you can bet Democrats will once we hit the general if Donald Trump is, in fact, the nominee. So this will not be far from the forefront. That said, for the next few months, think about the next big political thing happening, right? We've been through the first Republican primary debate now. We'll have a few more. We're going to hit Iowa here in January, New Hampshire, Nevada, South Carolina. We have seen many of the former president's Republican rivals take a pass on trying to land a punch on him, with the exception of maybe Chris Christie and some others, people who are not polling nearly as high as former President Trump. The political landscape for him makes it such that he's the one who gets to drive the narrative on this issue as it relates to the GOP primary.
And I'm just hearing, according to the website of the court, that he has completed the booking process and has been released. So we may see at least the motorcade on the move again. Chuck Todd, I think you're with us, the moderator of Meet the Press. And, you know, these conversations about the former president's fate sometimes get lost in politics versus law enforcement. This idea that he's playing to the court of public opinion, will that matter in the long run?
Well, it probably won't matter in the courtroom. I say probably because we don't know how much influence this could have on potential jurors. But look, let's remember the intention of Donald Trump. As the legal walls were closing in, he decided to become an active candidate much sooner. And I know this gets lost, but it's one of these things. He essentially decided to wrap his legal problems and his campaign into one, believing essentially the only way he can save himself legally is to somehow win the presidency again. That is the ultimate legal strategy he has, because when you look at everything he's facing, he's not going to win all of these cases. The only way he pulls this rabbit out of a hat is if he somehow wins the presidency. But I will tell you, I think as this continues to progress, there is just enough Republicans that this is going to not be easy for him to survive and somehow get through both of these things. This is, I know we're so used to Trump always being able to pull these things out. I think we have to watch this play out. All I will say is the convention is next summer, and there's a lot of time between now and that convention when they officially have to nominate somebody.
All right, Chuck, thank you. Let me bring in NBC News legal analyst Danny Savalas. Danny, this process, this booking has happened rather quickly. As we mentioned, the word is now out that he has been released, and we expect to see him here anytime. This idea of treating him like any other defendant, is that simply impossible?
There were talks, including from the sheriff, that Trump would be treated like any other defendant. But of course, that was never going to be the case. Most people who get booked in jails, whether it's in Fulton County, Philadelphia County, New York County, they're all pretty much the same. They're inefficient places. They're not designed for customer service. The kinds of things that you might get addressed in a few minutes at some private company get addressed in hours upon hours. They're understaffed. They don't smell great. And normally they are a shocking place, even if you are flanked by Secret Service members who are there to protect you. But of course, it was always going to be the case that the former president was going to receive special treatment at this jail because he is the former president. He is flanked by Secret Service members, and it is in both sides' interest to get in and out of there as quickly as possible. Jails are always concerned about disruptions. They're always concerned about safety. And again, they're under-resourced, understaffed. This particular jail is reportedly the source of an investigation by DOJ. So it's probably like most other large county jails, an unpleasant, unsafe, inefficient place to be, unless you're the former president.
So the next guy that walks in there tonight on an unrelated charge, it's not going to be 15, 20 minutes.
He will not ride back in a motorcade 15 or 20 minutes after he gets out. He will probably sit on a cot that is maybe an inch thick. If there is a cot, sometimes there isn't a cot. I've even seen photos of the Fulton County Jail. It looks pretty similar to most other jails. Not a great place to be. Normally, you get a full health screening. I don't think he's going to get that. But of course, it really depends on what they've worked out with Secret Service and maybe even with the sheriff in advance.
Yeah, we may be getting a little more on that. Laura, you've got some more of the court activity?
Yeah, it shows sort of the formal list of the charges. Again, you can see it on screen there with all of the different amounts for each of the individual charges. They break it up like that. That's standard. And again, in the top right-hand corner there, you can see his race, his weight, his height, all of the standard biographical information. And you know, it just strikes me, as Danny was pointing out, there are so many differences in a case, obviously, involving the former president and having Secret Service there and not having to spend, you know, more than 15 minutes in a situation like this in a jail cell. Of course not, but it does strike us, I think, that now that we're on our fourth one of these, that the system is holding. The system is still functioning. He is still putting up a bond amount. He is still actually having to be traipsed into a county jail. And so even though there are certainly striking differences between him and any other criminal defendant, I do think it is worth pointing out that he still does have to go through the indignity of this process.
Kristen Welker, you can't escape what we saw last night in the Republican debate. The people who are running against him, the people who want the job that he held, are having a difficult time condemning him. And what we're seeing here today, that will continue all the way up to Election Day.
It absolutely will. One of the most striking moments of that first GOP primary debate last night, Lester, was when the moderators asked if the candidates would continue to support former President Trump even if he is convicted of any of these crimes. And all of the candidates raised their hand to say yes, except for two. Chris Christie and Asa Hutchinson. And so I think it speaks to the fact that politically speaking, because when you look at the polls, we just released a poll this week of Iowa caucus goers, and he has a lead of 23 points over Ron DeSantis. So attacking him is just not popular. And these Republican candidates are really twisting themselves into knots, trying to figure out how to do it. I'm told by someone who is with him that they will be leaving soon. And so we expect to see his motorcade on the move soon, and we're trying to get reaction and trying to get more information about everything that has occurred with this booking process. But again, just an extraordinary set of events unfolding tonight.
And as we've seen in some of the other court proceedings or booking proceedings, the supporters of the former president have gathered. We're seeing it in Atlanta outside the courthouse. Gabe Gutierrez, what are you seeing?
Hey there, Lester. Well, a lot of these supporters had wanted to see the former president as he came into the Fulton County Jail. That did not happen, at least at this location, because he went in around the corner where my colleague Blaine Alexander is. But I can show you that this crowd, continues to stay here and wait to see if they might catch a glimpse if he were to pass by here. This entire street, it is shut down, Lester. This is Rice Street, very well known here in Atlanta. And if my colleague Randy Brown can pan over there and show the police presence, the sheriff's deputies that are across the street. And actually, you can see the sheriff's deputies. It might be tough to catch behind this sign here, but there are several of them that have been here really throughout the day. And we did see a ramping up of security earlier today as they put up more barricades, to try and make sure that this was an orderly process. So far, it has been. But again, several of Mr. Trump's supporters were hoping to catch a glimpse of him. But again, it's just historic. And I can tell you, Lester, from being at several of these other court proceedings in New York and also in Miami, it is remarkable to see a former president of the United States go through this, surrender to authorities here, now facing his fourth indictment. So the supporters here say that they will stay until he leaves. And again, they're hoping to catch one more glimpse of him, perhaps as he leaves Fulton County Jail, although he will likely do it from around the corner. Lester.
Yeah, and Gay, let me say, I'm glad you pointed out the historic nature of this, because we tend to easily get jaded with moments like this, right? Because we're seeing the fourth one here, as you point out, in just less than 5 months. I want to bring in former federal prosecutor, NBC News legal analyst Carol Lamb. Carol, Did we get a bit of a preview of the logjam to come in this case? Not just this case, all four, and the scheduling issues that could raise their heads?
Oh, we certainly have, Lester. What we've previously called a bumper cars problem with all of these trials butting up against each other. I think we now, actually, with Fani Willis's case, have a sort of broomstick problem where it's splintering into many different possible trials. And I think that Fani Willis, although she has said she really wants this trial to go quickly and to happen before the election, I think she realizes that that's likely not going to happen with all 19 defendants. And the former president has now told the court that he does not want to exercise his speedy trial rights here, the way Mr. Chesebro has. And so I think what's likely to happen is his trial will be far into the future, and Jack Smith's trial of former President Trump will probably go on much sooner.
All right, Carol, thank you. We're looking at the motorcade of former President Trump as it exits the jail complex right now. And I understand we've got some word about whether a mugshot was taken.
We have just been told by one of the former president's aides who is with President Trump that, in fact, it is their understanding that a mugshot was taken. These aides have not seen the mugshot yet, but again, they have been told that there was a mugshot. And so we are waiting to get more information about that. But that was one of the big questions looming over these proceedings. Would there, in fact, be a mugshot?
And there was a lag in some of the earlier defendants who came in. This we would expect to see before the night is over.
Well, and we've certainly requested it along with every other media organization, as you can imagine. And, you know, we'd wondered whether the sheriff would do this, as he had said he was going to treat him like everybody else. But as Kristen has raised, you know, there are political implications to doing so, and he might be able to use it for his own purposes. But for the sheriff's purposes, if you're trying to show even-handed administration of justice and going through the routine booking process, this is part of that process. But Lester, this is the first time he's had to do it. In every other surrender, in New York, in Miami, in Washington, D.C., he hasn't had to take a mugshot.
It is clear that he wanted to see this. You know, he put the information out that he would be surrendering at 7:30 tonight on his own Truth Social. Right. So this was a moment that he wanted the nation to see.
Well, this is part of his strategy of energizing his supporters, Lester. This is part of the former president's way of making his case that he believes these are unfair proceedings. It is worth noting that in an earlier indictment, when there was not a mugshot taken, the campaign released a fake mugshot and released it on a fundraising email and raised a lot of money. It is an effective way to energize and rally his supporters. And now here they, it seems at this point, have the real thing. And so we wait for it to be actually released. But this is just a hugely significant, somber moment, a mugshot of a former president.
And this camera you're looking at, this is a pool camera. It's to feed to the press, so it's within the motorcade now as it leaves the area. Let's go back to Blaine Alexander. Have you seen, did the motorcade make it past you?
Absolutely. We saw it as it drove out of this gate, Lester. We saw it as it sped down the road, and we saw it as it disappeared from the streets. You know, I want to weigh in on that mugshot conversation, too. This is a decision that I know was not taken lightly. In fact, I understand that there were discussions and considerations as to whether or not this would happen, whether or not a mugshot would actually be taken up until today. So there was certainly a lot of weight behind this decision to take a mugshot. We understand that there were conversations, perhaps some who were pushing back on it. So certainly very interesting to see that it actually has materialized. Now, as for here outside of the jail, I want to just kind of clock how quickly that happened. He drove in and drove out. That motorcade left within 22 minutes. That is a stunningly fast amount of time when you talk about the fact that he was able to get inside, get fingerprinted, mugshot booked, and then leave the jail in that same motorcade. Again, some inmates, some people who come in here just on a normal day, if you or I were to come in here, it could take upwards of 12 hours to do the exact same process that we just saw unfold here. So we know, again, that the bond was already in place. We know that the booking information actually made it online before the former president even entered the building. So that just kind of speaks to how expedited this entire thing was. And certainly, again, though, the fact that he took a mugshot, very, very stunning moment here in Atlanta.
Yeah, Blaine, just very quickly, is the expectation he flies back to New Jersey tonight? All right, well, we continue to watch that motorcade as we briefly lose the signal. The former president, again, has been processed, formally booked, and as you just heard, we have confirmed that a mugshot was taken, which we presume will be released for the public at some point in the not-distant future. That concludes this NBC News special report. We'll continue coverage on our streaming network, NBC News Now.
We are picking up our NBC News special coverage as former President Trump is now heading back to the Atlanta airport after getting booked now for the 4th time in 5 months. And according to a source familiar, taking a mugshot in the process. I'm Hallie Jackson.
And I'm Tom Yamas. You're looking at these live pictures right now on the left hand of your screen. That is the media pool. We are actually live inside that motorcade as it is heading back to the Atlanta airport, where the president, the former president, will board his private plane and head back to New Jersey. On the right hand of your screen are the highways and the roads of Atlanta as this process continues on.
This is after, of course, the former president left that Fulton County Jail where he was booked on 13 counts related to his push to illegally try to overturn the 2020 election based on lies about fraud in Georgia.
We know that he spent about 20 minutes, Hallie, inside the Fulton County Jail getting booked. And as we've reported here at NBC News, an aide to the former president telling us that a mugshot was indeed taken. We have not seen that again. That's according to the former president's people.
One of the optics here, fascinating, Tom, not just the mugshot, but watching the former leader of the free world walk into an active jail, the Rice Street Jail, getting booked on these charges, now set to leave. Question is, could he speak with reporters, the team of reporters traveling with him as he gets ready to head back to his Bedminster home?
And there were major legal developments today, too. The former president changing his lead attorney in this case, hiring a high-profile defense attorney out of Atlanta who has represented some of the most famous rappers in the game, along with people who have been accused of RICO charges as well, and who has beaten those charges. It's a major power play by the former president.
It is a historic moment for this country. It may feel routine at this point now. This is the 4th time we've been here. But, Tom, given the scope of all this, it is anything but.
And this one's different. This one's state court. This is state prosecutors. This is possibly a mugshot that we may even see in the coming hours and that will be broadcast around the world. As I've said before, it would be an iconic image in the worst possible way for the former president. But then again, Hallie, you know this, on the political side, it may rally his base.
I wouldn't be surprised if you saw it show up on T-shirts in his merch store, Tom. We've got it covered from every angle as we are bringing you this live rolling coverage right here on NBC News. We have our team of reporters covering this from coast to coast.
Yeah, and they're here to break down all the angles on this historic day for our country. One that after 4 arrests might be feeling, you know what, like we've been here before. But again, Hallie, this is also different. We're going to start with Gabe Gutierrez. He's live in Atlanta for us, and he's outside the Fulton County Jail for us right now. Gabe, you were there moment by moment as those supporters, you were talking to them in real time as that motorcade came through. Gabe, what was that moment like? And what are the Trump supporters telling you out there outside the jail?
Hi there, Tom and Hallie. Well, we're outside of the main entrance to the Fulton County Jail, and I want to show you what the scene looks like right now. Again, many Trump supporters that are still here. Many of them actually disappointed, however, Tom and Hallie, because this is the main entrance. This is the entrance where there was a large police presence. However, the former president actually came in around the corner, the back entrance. My colleague Blaine Alexander has been reporting from there, and that is where the motorcade went in. And so these supporters did not catch a glimpse of the former president. But we have been speaking with them more generally about what the significance of this surrendering was, of this court proceedings, and of this indictments in general. Many of them are so frustrated, Hallie. As you can see, let me show you a little bit more of this as photojournalist Randy Brown can pan over here and show just how many people showed up. Really dozens in the morning. More and more people gathered here throughout the day. And Tom, I was speaking with you earlier that the Fulton County Sheriff's Office is taking this very seriously, as other local jurisdictions have, the surrendering of a former president of the United States. And so interesting, Tom, this happened so quickly. There was surprise here among the crowd that really he only took 20 minutes to go in and be booked. Earlier in the day, we had gotten a mugshot from former Chief of Staff Mark Meadows, and he was released on $100,000 bond. but other co-defendants took anywhere from a little less than an hour to an hour and a half. This is a very quick proceeding, Tom, when it comes to, what the former president actually had to go through. And now there are lots of questions, which I'm sure you'll get to in this special report, about when this legal process, how it will eventually play out. One of his co-defendants submitting that proposal early this week, that court filing asking for a speedy trial today, a trial date for that one defendant being set for October 23rd. Remarkably, Tom and Hallie, on such a complex case, even if it's for one defendant, legal experts say that may or may not happen. But now the Trump legal team coming back and saying, no, we want to separate our case from that, and we want to separate it from anyone who wants a speedy trial. They're, of course, advocating for a trial that could take place as late as 2026. Gabe, so we have been speaking again with the Trump supporters here. Go ahead, Tom.
I was going to say, as you've been reporting behind you, you don't have eyes in the back of your head, but it looks like some of the demonstrators are now mixing it up with the protesters, not in a violent way, but we saw some of those people who have been sort of protesting against the president with those signs, sort of mocking the president, now mixing in a little bit with the Trump people as well. Hallie, you've been watching this?
And this is what we've seen, Gabe, at some of these moments here, right?
Over here.
Yeah. You're right, Gabe. I mean, I think back to Miami, for example, when the former president was indicted there. It is a scene when he shows up for these moments. It has become now a pattern.
That's right. And Hallie, you see, it really is a surreal scene. And you made the point earlier. It's remarkable. Yes, this might be the fourth time this has happened, but each time it is surreal, unprecedented, whatever adjective you want to say. You have members of the media here really from around the world, this broadcaster, from overseas. Yes, you have Trump supporters here. You have counter demonstrators that are supporting Fani Willis here, mixing it up with them, getting into verbal disagreements. In this particular situation, it hasn't been overly tense. There's been, some verbal back and forth, some raised voices, but nothing serious. But this is something that local authorities, though, have had to prepare for. Prepare for here, prepare for down in Miami, in D.C., in New York, something we're seeing play on over and over again. But again, a former president of the United States surrendering on multiple felony charges just in the past few moments. And these folks were here to voice their support.
And Gabe, I want to remind our viewers what they're watching right now. The center of your screen, the former president's motorcade heading back to the airport. That left screen there, an incredible shot. It's our media pool. These are live images mile by mile as the former president, after being just arraigned on these charges, is heading back to his airplane. Gabe, I want to ask you, as we've seen the mugshots, and Hallie, I mean, every time we saw the mugshot of Mark Meadows, Rudy Giuliani, it's stunning to see these people who were public servants and then to see these criminal mugshots. Look at this here. Gabe, my question to you is, how quick was the turnaround time from the moment those mugshots were taken, do we know, till the time that we actually saw them posted and released publicly? The sheriff has just confirmed to our Blaine Alexander that indeed a mugshot was taken of former President Trump. I'm just curious to know when we actually think we're going to see it.
Tom, again, it's all speculation at this point, but informed speculation. We can tell you that the mugshots that you just put up there on the screen, we would get them after, a co-defendant was booked, potentially within a few hours, 2 hours or so. Mark Meadows, we were waiting this afternoon when he was first put on the website the information about him being booked. It wasn't a very long time before that mugshot came out. I can tell you earlier there was some consideration that we might, have to wait until the following business day to get that mugshot. That hasn't happened here. The local authorities have been very good and transparent about releasing those mugshots on a timely basis. So if that tracks, and we do have confirmation from a source with the Trump campaign, but also, as I understand it, our colleague reporting from an official source here that a mugshot was taken, it's possible we could see it, within the next few minutes or perhaps the next few hours. I was speaking with several of the Trump supporters here who are waiting for that mugshot. And certainly this is something that the Trump campaign likely plans to use in order to raise money. And this iconic shot, as you said, Tom, and for all the worst reasons.
It is an extraordinary optic here, the way that the former president, Tom, has both been treated like any other criminal defendant in a criminal case and the way that he has been treated as an exceptional defendant in this case. Look at the speed by which this processing happened. I don't know that either one of us thought we'd be sitting here at this point watching him head back to New Jersey already at 8:08 Eastern time here, much less that he'd have had his mugshot taken. That had been a question mark all day. Would we see this or not? The way that this image is going to be used. I want to bring in Chuck Todd as we stay in these live pictures here. I want to ask our control room to keep these up. And Chuck, this is something that you will see likely from both Democrats and Republicans for the next year and a half of this political campaign.
Yeah, no, I mean, he's done Trump has done an amazing job convincing his supporters that these moments are badges of honor, right? He has wrapped himself in this martyrdom, victimhood, and it's quite remarkable in some ways what he's pulled off here. It still feels as if, there's still a long way to go. He's made it through the arraignment portion of this, but when we start to get information, when discovery starts to come out, and who knows, maybe he survives that too, but this is going to, there's going to be every day, every week, there's going to be a reminder. Maybe there'll be a motion by somebody to sever ties. Maybe somebody decides to start cooperating. And it won't even necessarily be in this case, could be another case. And you just start to wonder, when is this fatigue with Republicans going to set in? You see it, the candidates are fatigued from this. We know behind the scenes there's not a lot of faith that somehow Trump can win a general election with all of this hanging over his head. But I know Trump survives more than stuff that nobody else can survive. But at some point, the straw will break his back, too. And I look at all this. I watch what happened last night. You put all this together and you just got to ask yourself, can he really withstand more of this? We haven't even started with the actual details of what's going to come out in some of these trials.
That's right, Chuck.
And we haven't, what's going to happen then?
Yeah.
What's the feeling going to be like?
We've got a lot of political road ahead of us here, but we're also finding out now from our Blaine Alexander that there has been now a response to a bomb threat at the Fulton County Courthouse, according to the sheriff, with K-9 units, police en route. I want to get back to our Gabe Gutierrez, who is live for us in Atlanta. Gabe, just to remind people, and Tom, you know this, the Fulton County Courthouse is not where Donald Trump has been. He has been at the Fulton County Jail. That is a different and separate location. And yet, Gabe, one of the things we've been talking about in the lead up to this surrender by the former president has been the way that police and the security apparatus in that city has been on edge and bracing for whatever may come.
Hi there, Hallie. I'm not sure if that was to me. It's a little tough to hear here, but I can tell you, yes, I'm looking at the same note you are. And this, the Fulton County Courthouse, as I mentioned, about a 15, 20-minute drive or so from where I'm standing. And according to my colleague, Blaine Alexander, yes, the Fulton County Sheriff's Office responded to a bomb threat at the courthouse. The sheriff says that there was a K-9 unit and local police en route. One of our producers also there on the scene says that there is a K-9 unit as well. Look, Hallie, this is something that certainly local authorities have been very careful. Just a few hours here, another member of our team saw a bomb squad unit go into the Fulton County Jail that is behind me. Not surprising that local authorities will be prepared at several of these major locations to make sure and be very vigilant in case any of these threats were to come in. At this indication, at this time, we don't have any indication that this is, the seriousness of this bomb threat, or if there's anything to it. They're just going to check it out at this point. But again, that breaking news is that yes, there is investigation of a possible bomb threat over at the Fulton County Courthouse. Again, not the location where the former president came to surrender just a few moments ago.
Gabe, stand by for us. We have more breaking news. The president now arriving to his private jet there at the Atlanta Hartsfield Airport, about to board his plane and take off from Atlanta after being charged with all of those crimes, again, being accused of interfering in the 2020 election. This is his fourth indictment so far, if you're keeping count here, along with 18 other co-defendants. They have until tomorrow, because some people still in this case have not turned themselves in. The big piece of news that we've gotten over the last several minutes, besides this bomb threat at the courthouse, of course, we've now confirmed that there is a mugshot of the former president that was taken at the Fulton County Jail. At some point, maybe possibly in the next couple of hours, we will see that mugshot. We don't know exactly when. We know now that the press, as we're seeing on the right, is assembling now as the president's going to get out. Secret Service on hand there, Fulton County Sheriff's deputies. There was a massive motorcade. The streets of Atlanta were closed down. And this is pretty incredible, Hallie, that he's did this entire process in less than an hour.
I don't think that was the expectation expectation for anybody walking into this thing, how quickly this would go. And just to pull back the curtain here so people know what they're looking at. When the former president travels, there is a pool of reporters that goes with him because he is, of course, the former commander-in-chief. And there is a high level of interest and newsworthiness to what he does. Those are the people you just saw scramble into place. We are watching this extremely closely because we expect to now see,
just
for the first time, we'll get him on the plane. He'll get on the plane. He may speak. We don't know, right? But it is going to be the first image we see of him since this surrender, since this booking, as we are watching now this motorcade live. There's a shot there. We know that he'd been traveling with his top campaign advisors, including Jason Miller, for example. Walt Nada, by the way, his body man, a co-defendant in a separate federal case against the former president.
And the pool is assembled in a manner, and look, we don't know what's going to happen here. He could be listening to his attorneys. He may just jump on the plane. But knowing the former president, you don't know what to predict here. He could come out and he could say something.
We already know he's going to speak later. He's already been previewing an interview next hour over on Newsmax. This is somebody who has, in many ways, according to legal experts, has defied the advice they might give to speak openly and frequently about the cases he's faced, framing it as political persecution against him.
And just reading the tea leaves here and just looking at the images, it doesn't sound or look like the plane has been turned on. That would lead you to believe, and you have the lights up there as well, which is actually kind of interesting, too, on an active runway, those lights that have been set up there. You wonder if they've set up for some kind of comments here. Again, we don't know. We're just having both covered former President Trump.
So you've been there. You know what this is like, Tom.
Yeah, he's willing to do something. And it's impossible to get sound on a tarmac when the plane is turned on. You just can never hear anybody. Sometimes politicians use that to their advantage. Here it looks like it's not turned on, and it looks like they could possibly be waiting for something. I'd also got to say, Hallie, they set up the pool that way. I guess to get a shot, too. We shouldn't get, too ahead of ourselves. They could just be setting up for the shot outside the car.
Listen,
but why would he get out that way?
Well, he's got to get on the plane, right? He's got to get on. He's going to fly back to Bedminster. So we know that we will see him here in an evening as we now round the corner past 8:15 Eastern time, when we have seen extraordinary optics before, right? I mean, this is a moment for the former president, one that is making history here. We know that he has just hours ago switched up his attorneys. He now has a new lead attorney as the president appears to be walking over to the members of the media who have been assembled. We are obviously going to listen in. Let's take it.
I really believe this is a very sad day for America. This should never happen. If you challenge an election, you should be able to challenge an election. I thought the election was a rigged election, a stolen election, and I should have every right to do that. As you know, you have many people that you've been watching over the years do the same thing, whether it's Hillary Clinton or Stacey Abrams or many others. When you have that great freedom to challenge, you have to be able to, otherwise you're going to have very dishonest elections. What has taken place here is a travesty of justice. We did nothing wrong. I did nothing wrong. And everybody knows it. I've never had such support. And that goes with the other ones, too. What they're doing is election interference. They're trying to interfere with an election. There's never been anything like it in our country before. This is their way of campaigning. And this is one instance, but you have three other instances. It's election interference. So I want to thank you for being here. We did nothing wrong at all. And we have every right, every single right, to challenge an election that we think is dishonest, that we think is very dishonest. So thank you all very much, and I'll see you very soon. Thank you very much.
Just been listening to former President Trump wrap up his first comments since he was fingerprinted, since his mugshot was taken, since he was told what he's been charged with, and he's heading back to his private plane now, basically saying that, he had every right to do what he did, that you can challenge an election, that this was a sad day for America. It was a travesty of justice. But notably, Hallie, he didn't attack anyone. He's been sort of banned, especially on social media, of attacking and I think speaking about his co-defendants.
It's a condition of his bond.
A condition of his bond. But, and we have Catherine Christian here, who's a former prosecutor. And Catherine, I got to ask you, he says every American has a right to challenge an election. We know that Al Gore challenged the election as well. What did former president do wrong in the indictment, according to the indictment, so our viewers understand why what he said there is not exactly 100% correct?
Well, it's completely not 100% correct because he has not been indicted for his free speech, his right to challenge the election. The way they challenged the election was unlawful. They created false electors who pretended to be Trump's electors when they were really Biden, or they weren't even Biden. They just came out of thin air. They were Trump's electors. They created false, fraudulent certifications for the electors. That's forgery. The fake electors in this charge is impersonating a public official. They intimidated and harassed and threatened election workers, Ruby Freeman and Shay Moss, mother-daughter election workers, 2 black women in the South. They were threatened. There's a trio of defendants who were part of this RICO indictment. Kanye West, former publicist, the director of Black Voices for Trump, a pastor.
Calling the Secretary of State.
Yes. They went and intimidated her. Mr. Trump, when he did that perfect call to the Secretary of State, he defamed both of them. He called them professional vote scammers, political operatives. He said that, they stuffed votes into a suitcase. And, of course, Rudy Giuliani, who is a defamation suit against him, and he just acknowledged that he did defame them. He called them criminals. He said their house would be searched. The voting machines, those voting machines were tampered with. So these are acts that Hillary Clinton and Stacey Abrams did not do.
Hallie, as a Trump watcher over the last decade, what did you notice about the president's sort of demeanor and his comments there? Did he seem almost, he didn't seem like he was that fighting spirit, right?
I think he seemed defiant, and I think that is par for the course for him in these moments. I think you make an important point here about the conditions of his bond. That is serious, and if he violates those conditions, there could, of course, be repercussions against him. And I think it's important to sort of bottom line the conversation that you and Catherine are having. There are mechanisms by which to challenge results of the election that happen in a court of law. Dozens of those legal challenges were losses for the former president and his allies in court. There has been no evidence of widespread fraud in the 2020 election around the country or specifically in Georgia, where he is facing these charges. Now, he is linked his legal issues to his political future. They are one and the same. There's no 2 lanes, right? We may talk about it like it's 2 different buckets. It's all one big bucket for the former president. And I think that's what you're seeing play out here very vividly. I want to bring in Ken Delaney, who's been watching this as well. And Ken, the language that the former president chose here in the minutes after he was booked at an active jail in Fulton County is in many ways similar to what we've heard from him in the past 3 indictments.
Yes, but perhaps more restrained, Hallie, because as you said, as a condition of his bond in the Georgia case, he is prohibited from making threats or making statements that could be perceived as threatening to co-defendants, witnesses, victims, or the community at large. And he's prohibited from doing that on social media. But, if he appeared a bit chastened, which I think you guys were perceiving, it may be because this booking was so unlike the other 3 cases through which he's endured kind of a related process. In the other 3 instances, he was in courthouses. He was briefly escorted through the briefing process and then moved on to court. In this case, he went to a county jail. A notorious county jail, not a nice place. And as you're seeing from the reports that we're about to see a mugshot at some point, officials in Fulton County, Atlanta, treated him as best they could like any other defendant. Obviously not to the point where he had to sit for a few hours in the jail. But it's really different from what was done in the federal system. This would if a mugshot is released, this would be the first time that has happened, because in the other bookings and arraignments, federal authorities decided they didn't need to take a mugshot. The federal marshals said they would use an existing photo of Donald Trump. They made that decision, even though their normal procedures dictate a mugshot. So in this case, he was treated like every other defendant in many ways, and that must have been a sobering thing to endure for a former president.
Well, let me bring in Charlie Bailey now, one of our legal analysts who, as a former prosecutor, knows Fulton County inside and out, Charlie, and to the point that Ken and others are making here, the speed by which this happened, right? Here we are now, just about 8:30 Eastern time. Donald Trump has now boarded his plane. You're seeing that live look here on the left side of your screen at the Atlanta airport. He is headed back to his home in Bedminster, New Jersey. He's going to land, we expect him to, at Newark Airport. He was in and out, boy, in the blink of an eye, Charlie. And can you give us some insight here into the conversations that may have been happening behind the scenes in order to execute on that?
Well, his attorneys would have been in touch, obviously, with the DA's office. That's how they worked out the consent bond. And then I would expect as well with the sheriff's office, as well as Secret Service, been in touch with the sheriff's office so that they could make it efficient, because the jail didn't want him there that long either. Once it's known that someone's not going to be booked in and staying in the jail, the jail's got to operate. You know, they've got folks that they've got to keep safe and keep in that jail. And the longer Donald Trump was in there, the more difficult that job is. So they were incentivized to make this efficient and do the processing of the warrant, get the biographical information done, and then get him out. So they both had incentives to speed this along.
Charlie, I do want to ask you about what I think was maybe the most interesting legal development today. And this was the former president muscling up, right? Bringing in a hometown boy, somebody from the area, a very high-profile defense attorney. I think we have a graphic with some of the people that he's also defended here. Stephen Sadow is his new defense attorney, the lead in this case. He's defended people like Usher, Rick Ross, T.I., Gunna. And I bring this up because he has taken on your former employer, the Fulton County Prosecutor's Office, and he's beaten your office, right? He's gotten his clients off. So this move by former President Trump, who has deep pockets, right? What does this mean to you? And do the prosecutors there in Fulton County now have to bring their best game forward and put their best foot forward as they try this case?
Well, Steve's a good attorney, but Drew's a good attorney. And they both won cases in Fulton County, and they both lost plenty of cases in Fulton County as well. You know, I know as a lawyer, you know, lawyers want to talk about how lawyers are the most important factors. You know, they're really not. Now, I can't speak to what the internal discussions were between Donald Trump and his attorney, why he, you know, went from Drew Findling to Steve Sadow. It could just be a difference of opinion of strategy. That Sadow was more on board with. But
Sadow also has a lot of experience with RICO, from what I understand as well, with RICO cases.
He has, yes. He's defended several people on RICO. But I don't think, I'll say this, Fani Willis and her team are also extremely experienced when it comes to RICO. And they would have had this case prepared to execute at the highest level, regardless of which attorney is on the other side. And ultimately, what's going to matter is the evidence at trial. You know, attorneys can bluster and they can put out statements, prosecutors and criminal defense attorneys. But when the rubber meets the road, what do you have in terms of evidence? What do you have in terms of witnesses? That's what's going to make the impression upon this jury and whether they find Donald Trump guilty or not guilty.
Charlie, I don't know if you know the answer to this, but every time we've been covering these indictments, the great Danny Savalos, who's our TV news legal analyst, will always remind our viewers that federal prosecutors win about 90% of the cases they bring, right? So they have an incredible track record. What's the sort of the record for Fulton County Prosecutor's Office? Do you have any idea?
Yeah, I mean, it has hovered right around 90%, sometimes a little bit over, sometimes a little bit under, I think for about the last 20 years. And I think during Fani's tenure, which has been, I guess, the last 2.5 years, it's right over 90%. That's data I think I got about a couple of months ago. So it's about the same. You know, these Fani herself is, of course, as you may know, very experienced in RICO cases and was the lead on the APS, the Atlanta Public Schools cheating case, which took place back about 9 years ago. And that was an indictment that started out with 34 individuals. By the time it got to trial, there were 13. It was the longest criminal trial in the history of the state and one of the longest in the history of the country. So they know what they're doing in building out these indictments, and that office has a strong track record on getting convictions.
You are looking here live at the former president's plane taxiing now down the runway at the Atlanta airport. He is getting ready to head back to Newark, New Jersey, and then on to his home in Bedminster after surrendering, getting arrested, getting booked, getting processed on the 4th indictment that he has faced now in the last 5 months. I want to bring in NBC News legal analyst and former federal prosecutor Carol Lamb. So, Carol, the next piece of the puzzle here, the next thing that will happen will be an arraignment for the former president. Remember, this was the booking and processing. This was not the arraignment. Sometimes they happen roughly at the same time on the same day. That's not the case here. Is it possible that the former president could have his appearance at his arraignment in roughly 2 weeks waived? Could it happen virtually under the processes in Georgia? What can you tell us as we look at the live shot here of that plane getting ready to take off?
Yeah, I think that's quite possible. I think it's possible that now that the booking and the processing has taken place, where they actually do have to have his photograph and they have to have his fingerprints, he actually has to be there in person. It is quite possible that the Georgia rules allow for remote appearances for arraignment, which are usually pretty perfunctory, unless there's going to be some sort of argument there about motions that he wants to file or such. There really isn't that much need for him to appear in person. So I think that's given particularly his schedule with respect to the election, I think that's quite likely to happen.
Carol, we thank you for your analysis. Stand by for us. I do want to bring in someone who knows the president very well, someone who has worked for him in the White House. Hogan Gidley joins us live now. Hogan, I know you've been following all the developments over the last few hours. We just saw the president come out. We just got a note from our Kristen Welker that he is defiant. That is his mood. But I got to ask you, the president has been through so much. This is somebody who has gone bankrupt. He's gone through divorces. He's had his sex life put out on newspapers all over the world. He's won elections. He's lost elections. But he's never, ever had to take a mugshot. And now he's going to have that mugshot put out all over the world. What do you think that process is like for him, honestly? What do you think is going through his head right now? Because at least he didn't appear to be his usual sort of diehard fighter, ready to jump on that airplane. It looked like he had gone through something.
I don't think he's going to be smiling in that mugshot,
Yeah.
Hogan.
What was the question, Hallie? I'm sorry.
Oh, I just was saying, I don't think he's going to be smiling in his mugshot, Hogan, based on what we saw from him getting on that plane.
What do you think is his mindset, Hogan, essentially?
Yeah, look, I think what he said is how he feels. He is defiant. He feels as though this is a politically motivated attack. 77% of the American people agree with that. Whatever he's doing, whether he's running for president, whether he is president, whether he's now just a citizen, the same thing applies, and it's the attacks continue. This is clearly a weaponized government situation. I think Republicans view it as that. The mugshot that will inevitably come out will be used by both sides. Obviously, the left will say, look, how could you support somebody who's been indicted and took a mugshot, first president ever? The right will say, look, here's more evidence that whether you're a citizen standing up for life or whether you're fighting against critical race theory or educational problems in public schools with your child, the government's coming after you, and Donald Trump is just the tip of that spear. Here's a mugshot to prove it. They're coming after all of us. He said it best in Erie, Pennsylvania. They're not indicting me, they're indicting you. I think it's going to be another in a long line of examples Donald Trump will use, not just to martyr himself, but to continue to build out and solidify Republican support, where he's got a 50-point lead right now in the primary polling amongst GOP candidates. It looks like this isn't going to change at all. Lord knows the debate probably didn't change anything last night. This will probably just help him.
Hogan, I'm going to ask you to stand by for us here. I want to get to Greg Bluestein, a reporter for the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, somebody who has been following this case, this issue for years. And Greg, here we are again with Georgia in the spotlight in a big way. From a political perspective, it's one of the most important battlegrounds in the 2024 election. And our team's reporting is that there has been some concern bubbling inside the Trump orbit about how this plays for him down the road, not in a primary, but in a general election. Talk us through what you're seeing and hearing from your sources.
Exactly. Donald Trump has the dominant lead in Georgia Republican primaries, just like he has in primaries around the nation in early polling. But it's the general election that Republicans are very worried about because they don't see a conceivable path to victory in November 2024 without winning a state like Georgia. They feel like if Georgia's gone, then it's over for them. Chris Christie has been all over Georgia saying that very message as a reason why, if not him, Republican voters should back someone other than Donald Trump because they fear that if Donald Trump's on the ballot, he is doomed in Georgia. And there's data points pointing to that, right? There's a significant block of swing and independent voters who just can't stomach Donald Trump, and they can't stomach voting for Donald Trump's allies. And we've seen that in 2020, 2021, and 2022.
Greg, what can you tell our viewers about the DA here, Fani Willis? What should people know about her and understand about her? I know she was elected. She beat her former boss. But what else should we know?
Yeah, well, you're right. She beat her former boss, which was a huge deal because he was a long-time incumbent who really struck fear in the hearts of many lawyers and people around the community here in Atlanta. She's gone after corrupt teachers. She's gone after drug dealers. She's gone after street gangs. She's someone who's an expert in RICO law. A decade ago, she helmed the prosecution of a massive corruption and a cheating scandal involving Atlanta Public Schools and secured prosecutions and plea deals from most of the defendants in that case. So this is someone not to be trifled with, and she has been working on this case for more than 2 years. That's why we're seeing her ready to take it to trial, even if it's speedy, even if it's quicker than many legal experts anticipated.
Former President Trump, active, of course, online as he has been from the second that he jumped into the campaign back in 2015. In just the last couple of seconds here, posting video of himself on the tarmac, publicly, of course, pointing to the moment that he is in. He's already posted on his online social media platform about his arrest, his booking procedures, etc. And we should also note here, if you are watching us on a second screen here, if you're going back and forth, there is a bunch of fake mugshots circulating online. Those are not the real deal, but it is indicative here of the, as Tom has said, and I think rightly so, the iconic image that we expect to see coming out from the former president's booking, Greg.
Yeah, we might not see that image tonight. We might not see it early tomorrow morning. We expect to see it, though. But at the same time, look, even Donald Trump has promoted those fake images to sell T-shirts and merchandise for his campaign. So be very wary of those images you see unless they have the Fulton County Jail watermark and you're seeing it from trusted sources. But it's going to be iconic instantly. It's going to be on front pages of newspapers. It's going to be an image our kids grow up with. So it's really it's just this weird feeling right now, sensing that this image is almost going to be out, and it's going to be something that we remember for the rest of our lives.
Yeah, and you wonder if there's a safety aspect to this, right? Do they want to release it at a certain time to make sure that it doesn't lead to people seeing the images and maybe getting upset and then doing something else? I'm sure they're taking all that into consideration. Greg, stand by for us. I do want to bring in Chuck Todd again. As we talk about, this mugshot we may or may not see tonight, we know the president has raised a lot of money through these various indictments. If you count up all the criminal charges, I think he's being charged with more than 90 different crimes. It's costing him a lot of money. It's going to cost him millions of dollars, but he's able to raise money. Explain to our viewers how that process is working, because he's paying with these legal fees really through some of his political moves, correct?
He is. This first began, before he was an active candidate. He had the RNC, believe it or not, paying some of his legal fees. When he became an active candidate, they had to get rid of that deal. So then he used his super PAC. But he's using all political money. He's raising money from others to do this. It's not illegal, but he's not calling it a legal defense fund, right? He is just simply using his campaign rhetoric to raise this money to pay these lawyers. And, that's it reminds you that he has to keep running in order to defend himself. And in order to defend himself, he has to keep running. Like, we're in this sort of doom loop with him between the campaign and the legal issues that he's dealing with, because in order to pay for his defense, he needs the campaign to be active and relevant. So, it's funny. If he loses, I suspect he never stops running for president. I know that seems like the last thing anybody wants to think about is the next campaign. But I truly believe, because how much his legal defense is intertwined with his ability to raise money and be a sort of a political martyr here, as long as he's breathing, if he's got legal problems, I think he's going to try to always seem like an active political candidate.
But what's also interesting here, Chuck, is the way that the legal fees are an issue, not just for the former president, as we're talking about here, but for his 18 other co-defendants in this case. Vaughn Hilliard is joining us now and knows about this. We've already seen pushback from at least one of those co-defendants, upset that she's not getting financial help from the broader MAGA Inc. super PAC supported by those who support former President Trump, Vaughn.
Right. There was financial support for the folks who were going through the January 6th investigation. That was being paid by what is called the Save America PAC. This was a group that was set up to support Donald Trump and his political endeavors post-presidency. Well, that account had tens of millions of dollars in it, and it went towards legal services for Donald Trump and others, but it is almost run dry. And that is where you see none of these other 18 defendants yet receiving any sort of financial financial help. There's one individual who is actually one of the 19 co-defendants who is still inside of this jail because he did not post bond. He did not come up with a bond agreement here. And, you know, in a last-minute fundraising pitch over text message and email here this evening, Donald Trump said, I'm going in to be arrested, and was asking for donations. 90% of that donation, it actually goes to his 2024 campaign. But 10% of that goes to that organization, that PAC, which helps with the legal expenses. But Donald Trump is looking at 4 different trials ahead of him here that are going to undoubtedly be expensive. And there's serious questions about the actual extent to which funds are available for others. But, you know, the likes of Jenna Ellis, who is that lawyer that you're mentioning, who used to be very much of a Donald Trump ally, she has actively called and questioned where the financial support is, because so many of these defendants, they note that they were acting on behalf of Donald Trump. And right now, the man that they contend that they were acting on behalf of is done very little to support them here now as they face their own legal peril.
Vaughn, stand by for us. Ryan Nobles covers Capitol Hill for us. Ryan, we know so many in the Republican caucus there have stood by former President Trump through all of these processes. And we also know now that there's some movement in the House with investigations and Fani Willis as well.
Yeah, that's right, Tom. And there's no doubt, no coincidence at all that we saw the House Judiciary Committee this morning send a letter to Fani Willis asking for any information that she has related to her investigation that could involve the federal government on any level. They're interested in whether or not she's had any interactions with Jack Smith, the special counsel, who has, of course, brought up federal charges against Donald Trump, which are very similar to the charges that Donald Trump is facing in Fulton County. They're also asking if she's had any interface with the Department of Justice, and they also want to know about any federal funding that is involved in this prosecution of the former president. And this follows the exact same playbook that we saw the Judiciary Committee use when Donald Trump was charged in Manhattan. They did a similar letter and request to the district attorney there, Alvin Bragg, and they say that they're continuing their investigation into the investigation, if you will. And it is in many ways, Tom, just an effort by House Republicans to provide a level of cover for the former president and show that he has some support here at the federal level, and you know, at the very least, try and make the life of Fani Willis that much more difficult as she attempts to put together this very complex prosecution. Now, we should also point out that the things they're asking for information about, none of it is necessarily wrong. She's allowed to have communications with federal prosecutors. There's no law prohibiting that, and she has said repeatedly that they've not coordinated their investigations, that they are two separate and independent investigations. But nonetheless, this is the playbook for House Republicans, and it wasn't a surprise to see it happen today.
We are watching now the former president's plane taking off from the Atlanta airport, 8:41 Eastern time, a whirlwind, roughly 90 minutes for him on the ground in the state of Georgia, a state where he is facing now 13 charges under this racketeering law that's typically reserved for mafia bosses. As you see the plane flying off, obviously our coverage here from our NBC News station, from our affiliate, showing the former president's plane heading back. He has gotten support, not just from allies on Capitol Hill, but allies, Ryan, and I'll bring Vaughn Hilliard into this conversation as well, who are traveling with him to be, in effect, surrogates for him. We saw, for example, Marjorie Taylor Greene in Atlanta, outside the jail, speaking with members of our team, other reporters, defending the former president. That is something, Ryan, that he wants to see. He wants his loyalists out there speaking on his behalf.
Yeah, that's exactly right, Hallie. And we saw Marjorie Taylor Greene in the last 20 minutes or so tweet a fake version of the mugshot that we expect to see of President Trump in the next 24 hours or so, but with herself in the frame as a way to show solidarity with the former president, to show that she is in this fight with him, that she believes that his prosecution is unjust. You know, Marjorie Taylor Greene, an example of someone who is as loyal to the former president in the House of Representatives as anyone. Someone else who is very supportive of him as well is the fourth-ranking member in the Republican conference, and that's Elise Stefanik, who put out a statement not too long ago, very critical of Fani Willis and the district attorney's office, saying that it was nothing more than a political prosecution. I should point out, though, Hallie, you know, this is the fourth time we've all gone through this. In the previous 3 incarnations or versions of these indictments, we've seen the statements and the tweets of support from Republicans in both the House and Senate roll in at a much faster clip than we're seeing here tonight. There does seem to be a little bit of lag between their responses than what we saw the previous 3 times around. And for instance, the first couple of times around, the House Speaker, Kevin McCarthy, was quick to put out a statement, not only supporting the former president, but then also attacking the Justice Department's investigation into the current president's son, Hunter Biden. That hasn't happened yet. That's not to say it won't, but I'm just saying in terms of the timing from what we've seen in the past, this has been a little bit different.
There could be some fatigue there. I mean, that is possible. Ryan, stand by for us. I do want to bring in a special guest tonight, Nick Ackerman. He was a former Watergate prosecutor. He's an expert in RICO. Nick, I know you've probably combed through the indictment there in Georgia, and I want to ask you, because even rivals like Governor Chris Christie have said that this is overreach, that some of this crosses with the federal case as well. They're not sure this case should have been brought. You've seen this indictment, I hope. What do you think, and is there a case down there in Georgia?
There's absolutely a case. This was not overreach. This is the proper application of the racketeering statute. It was not just meant for mob bosses. I brought the first RICO case. It was based on bankruptcy fraud and stock fraud. I brought the first white-collar case on RICO, which was against 2 executives at Warner Communications. Nothing to do with any mob bosses. I also brought the first case against a mob boss. But what's unique about the RICO statute is, as Fani Willis has recognized over the years, it permits you to put before the jury all of the wrongdoers in all of the crimes that they've committed so that they get to see the entire story. The advantage to the prosecution is that you put all of these defendants under one umbrella, one statute, one criminal statute. Some of these people may not have met each other before, but they all have the same goal. And that was, in this instance, to basically overturn the valid election victory of Joe Biden. This case is pretty simple. It's simply about lying and stealing. Lying about the fact that Donald Trump tried to claim that he won the election, that it was rigged. All of that can be proven to be a lie based on the evidence just that we know from the January 6th committee. I mean, just to give you a simple example, on December 30th, Donald Trump's own lawyer was writing that they had to file a federal lawsuit that day, and that Donald Trump was in a quandary because he would know that what he was saying was a lie, but yet he did it anyway. And then 2 days later, he talked to Secretary Raffensperger and basically went through all of those same lies. And Secretary Raffensperger told him exactly why those lies weren't correct and why they investigated it and what they found. And then lo and behold, the next day, what does Donald Trump do? Yeah. He goes out and makes a public statement saying that Secretary Raffensperger never responded to any of his complaints.
Nick, I have a legal question for you. You know, Georgia turned out to be the ultimate battleground state. There are sections of Georgia where he's very popular. Fulton County is not a county where he was very popular. He lost to Joe Biden there. I think it was 72 to 26. Would he have a legal argument that he can't get a fair case in Fulton County?
No, because there's going to be a voir dire of the jury. You'd be surprised how many people are absolutely clueless about what's going on. Probably the best example of that was the foreperson of the special grand jury. I mean, she candidly admitted when she talked to the press that she had no idea about any of these allegations, no idea about what they were investigating, and she bent over backwards to actually try and look at everything in an objective way. And she said that. And that's what you find with most jurors. I've been in high-profile cases before in jury selection, and it never ceases to amaze me how many people don't follow some of these things like you think that they might, or see the publicity that you think that they might. And so the real question comes down to every person who serves on that jury: can you be fair and impartial?
Nick, we got a bit of breaking news, so thank you. Just stand by for us.
We have gotten now the Donald Trump mugshot as obtained from the Fulton County Sheriff's Office. Again, there's some fakes that have been circulating out there. This is the real deal as reported from our Blaine Alexander. Full disclosure, it takes us like 10 seconds to turn it around and actually get it on television.
And the system is also crashing. We should report the Fulton County system.
The search system, apparently, because there's been such high interest in this. We're going to pull up Gabe Gutierrez, who's been live for us here from Atlanta. And the second we can show you this mugshot, mugshot, we will. But this answer is obviously a critical question that we've had since we knew that Donald Trump would be booked and processed on these charges, which is, would he have a mugshot? He did. And now we know what it looks like. I'm going to describe it to you. You're going to see it in literally 5 seconds. We are working to pull this up. He's scowling. He is, as we talked about before, Tom, he is not smiling in this. And this is an image that is already, one would imagine, set to ricochet around the world. This is somebody who has global name recognition from his time in the White House, even prior to that. Now, for the first time, and again, the optics of this, we haven't seen cameras at arraignments. We hadn't seen sort of that inside look at these processes. We'd just seen court sketches. This is now different. I'm about 8 seconds away from flipping my laptop to show you what this mugshot looks like. But I want to get to Gabe Gutierrez, Tom, and your thoughts too on this significant. Well,
Gabe, and Gabe, look, here it is. We have it right here. This is the mugshot we've been talking about. This is the first time we have ever seen a current president, a former president with a criminal mugshot. Former President Donald Trump, charged with 13 crimes in Fulton County, Georgia, and here is the mugshot. We've seen lots of images of Donald Trump over the years. We have never, ever seen anything like this.
Just wanted to take a moment here as we're taking this in. And Gabe Gutierrez, I think you probably are able to see it here. This is something that from this minute on will be not just a legal issue for the former president, but a political one. And I'm saying on both sides of the aisle here, Gabe.
Yeah, that's exactly right, Hallie. And you just spoke with the Donald Trump surrogate saying that, Democrats will point to this and look at the image in front of you and say that a person in this position should not be president of the United States. However, Mr. Trump supporters, and we spoke with many of them who are here today, and they say this is evidence, as they see it, of a weaponization of the legal system in this country. And as you see it right there, it is incredible to look at. A former president of the United States facing multiple felony counts, sitting for a mugshot, something that happens every day here at the Fulton County Jail around the clock. There will be more defendants that go through this process in the coming hours. There will be more that do it in the coming days and weeks, but never has there been a defendant quite like this one. And the enormity of this, it should not be glossed over, as you guys haven't, but the former president of the United States sitting for this mugshot. And I can tell you, I did see the former president back in New York. Still photographers were allowed in for a very brief time to capture an image of Mr. Trump when he was in that courtroom up in New York. However, sketch artists did it in federal court in Miami, but never has he had a mugshot taken.
Hey, Gabe.
This happening very quickly. Go ahead, Tom.
Gabe, I don't know if there's still supporters there, if there's still Trump supporters there. I would love if you could possibly show them the image to get their reaction. They may have peeled away by now, but I'm just sort of interested to see, because maybe people haven't seen this image just yet. If you get it, come back to us. Hallie, as we were looking at this image, I was thinking, here you have the most powerful person at one point in the world. And today in Fulton County, he was treated as a common criminal.
He was just like any of these other alleged criminals, these defendants here. And part of that is one of the questions that I think we have, and Catherine is joining us here, and I would wonder about this, right? He did not have his mugshot taken in these other 3 cases that he had faced. Largely, the speculation was because he is so recognizable. Everybody knows what Donald Trump looks like. That's not an exaggeration here. Why, in this instance, do you suspect that they moved forward with this particular piece of the booking procedure?
Well, I think it was very important. The sheriff in this case said, we're going to take his mugshot because we do it for everyone. So in many ways, that's a statement that's equal justice under the law. And maybe he should have had it taken in Manhattan and Miami and in D.C. I mean, yes, the purpose of the mugshot is, in case you flee, and he's clearly not going to flee. But all over the country, as your reporter said, and in every courthouse, defendants who are charged with criminal crimes, all of them have their mugshots taken. So he should have, just like every other defendant in this country. He's already getting special treatment because other defendants who had 4 open indictments would not still be free. So that he has a mugshot is, I think, a good statement in terms of equal justice.
Guys, do we still have Hogan and Amisha Cross? Are they still with us? Okay, I want to put them both up if we can. Hogan, I want to start with you. This is somebody you worked for. This is somebody you believed in. This is somebody who, for the rest of your life, your name will be associated with him. It's somebody who you still have a relationship with. Hogan, when you see this mugshot, what do you think?
Yeah, look, I think I was hoping he would smile. He didn't. I think, as I said in the previous segment, it looks like this is going to be something that will be on every literal coffee mug, on every T-shirt. They'll probably mark it and brand it and use it to raise money off of. It is a symbol to the right of the weaponization of government against the chief political rival of the sitting president of the United States. It will be used by the left to say, how could you support somebody who has been indicted, and here's his mugshot? So I understand the gravity of the moment here because no president has ever had this happen, but it's also the fourth in a long line of indictments. And so I don't want to overplay this as if it's going to impact the race. It may to some, but it remains to be seen. There are two battles here, one legal and one political. The legal will play itself out in due time. The political one seems more immediate. And right now, we've seen no indication that any of these indictments have really gone to hurt Donald Trump in the Republican nominating process. Will this photo change it? I don't think so. In fact, I think it'll embolden and anger a lot more people who may or may not have been sitting on the fence or looking at other candidates in this race. I think it's going to make people pretty angry.
We are already seeing in the last 30 seconds here, Congressman Andy Biggs, an ally of the former president, post this mugshot with the words, "I stand with President Donald J. Trump," to the point that Hogan is making. Amisha, he has cast this, Hogan has, and Hogan, you know, is a significant symbol to those on the right. Amisha, I imagine it is also a significant symbol to those on the left for a very different reason. Tell us what's in your group chats tonight.
Absolutely. For Democrats and for those who are working in progressive organizations, this just goes to show that Trump really isn't above the law. This is going to be shared widely. Because it is proof positive that what Trump tried to do and thought he could get away with in Georgia in making people's votes who look like me not count, he is not able to do without, you know, meeting the shred of justice that is available. But with that being said, I think that this is also, to a point Hogan made earlier, it's not going to move any Republicans. They're going to stand beside him like they always have, no matter what the indictments or the charges happen to be. But for Democrats, it is more of a, this isn't presidential. This is not someone who should be the leader of the free world or our democracy. This is someone who is a criminal. And I think that they're going to flash this as much as they possibly can. They're going to talk about what the meaning of this is, how close we were to losing our democracy because of the work of former President Donald Trump, and quite frankly, why he should not be eligible or even considered to be presidential at this point at all.
All right, Amisha Cross. Gabe, I want to go back to you. We only have about a minute left. What did those supporters of Donald Trump say when they first saw that mugshot?
Alvin, hey there, Tom. Sorry, I just came through quickly. I realized we're on a short amount of time. I'm actually here with several Trump supporters that I just spoke with right here. They are looking live right now at the mugshot for the first time. What's going through your head?
I think it's a shame that we have a party that thinks it's all right to arrest their political opponent. Even if there were charges, all politicians are guilty of several charges. I think if the Americans knew the truth of how guilty all the politicians were, there wouldn't be as much attention as there would be on other people.
And I'm really low on time, but I just want to get your reaction specifically. When you see that mugshot up there on that screen, what goes through your head?
It looks like an album cover for like a out of jail album cover.
All right, thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Thanks for talking with us. Tom, this is an album cover, something that the Trump campaign was certainly use this image to raise money they had before. And again, this is something that, former President Trump supporters, see as a rally call. Tom and Hallie, back to you.
Gabe Gutierrez, our thanks to you. Our thanks to our entire team of reporters and correspondents covering every angle of this historic night, as we are now, for the first time, seeing a mugshot of a former president of the United States.
We thank you for watching our special coverage of Donald Trump's fourth arrest in 5 months. You're watching NBC News Now.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.